First thing we're going to be talking about today is the Amazon TV show Carnival Row. We're going to be doing a little discussion/review of the TV show with Orlando Bloom and the chick from Valerian and 1,000
all
Cities.
8 episodes.
Eight.
Some people might better know her as the chick from Suicide Squad.
Oh yes, that. Oh
Yeah, the belly dancing villain lady.
yes, the witch.
Oh, is that where we saw her
That's
from?
yeah, she's the witch.
I thought I saw her on something before, but
What was her name in the movie Sorceress? Was that what it was?
she was the sorceress, really?
Yeah, she was the sorceress.
I just watched that on TV like 2 nights ago, and I didn't
that's
even
her.
recognize her.
She's a very recognizable person. Like, she has a very distinct look, which actually fits this show really well. She looks like a fairy.
She's a model.
Yeah, she does.
Yeah.
She cast that well.
Anyway, what do you guys think of it? First, just general thoughts. Did you like it? Did you enjoy it?
So, this show is actually executive produced by someone who worked on Deep Space Nine. I'm blanking on his name right now. It's he was one of the guys who was heavily involved with the Star Trek show Deep Space Nine, and he's a very good writer. He's a very good showrunner, and so I was expecting a lot from this Amazon original series, and I got to sit down and binge it over my vacation, which was nice. And I have mixed feelings about it, to tell you the truth. Like, if on a 5-star scale, I'd probably give it 3 stars, which is decent. So it's a perfectly fine kind of steampunky fantasy story. And basically the setup, without going into spoilers, it's the there's this fantasy land where humans have discovered fairies, and the 2 big human kingdoms in the world fight a war over conquering the fairy land, and the fairies kind of get caught up in the middle of it, and the good guys lose. The bad guys basically conquer fairyland, and so there's a bunch of mystical creature refugees that go to the side that lost, and it's kind of an allegory for immigration and a bunch of other stuff. But it's basically Victorian steampunk England with fantasy creatures.
Yeah,
stuff like centaurs and fae and
little fairy miniature
I
fairies.
think there's some kobolds in there somewhere, which are like little goblin guys if you don't know what they are.
Yeah, and I forget what the puck-like creatures are, the ones with the horns and the hooves.
Yeah.
So like there's a whole bunch of various fantasy creatures. There's a little bit of a hint at magic, even though it's not heavily used in the show. There's a lot of politics involved.
Yes, I know. That was cool.
So basically, it's all the elements of Deep Space Nine translated to Victorian England. But the acting in the show is top notch. The set design, the look and feel of it is gorgeous.
Yeah.
The characters and the writing, for the most part, I thought were pretty decent. There were a few kind of missteps in there. Rene Echeverria, that's the guy. He's the one who kind of was the brains behind this show. And I love Victorian style steampunky stuff like Jack the Ripper, and the crux of this show is based around a mystery, and Orlando Bloom plays this cop who is investigating a series of attacks in Carnival Row, which is where all the mystical creature immigrants have kind of congregated. And it faces a lot of prejudice from the police, and there's another subplot with Cara Evangeline. Is that her name? Clara Evangeline?
No idea.
The girl, I don't know either.
The girl from Valerian and
okay.
Suicide Squad. And so basically she plays this fairy that finally gets to Carnival Row after leaving her homeland, and her and Orlando Bloom's character have this history which kind of unfolds before us as the show goes on.
We were talking before. What did you think about having, I'll ask Matt real quick, what did you think about having that kind of flashback episode in mid-season, like episode 4?
So I believe that was episode 3 of the series. Yeah. I think that was honestly my favorite episode of the entire series. And, it was really cool in the world building, how they set everything up. And, a lot of backstory in that show, and, it was interesting. There was some stuff that they put in that episode that I don't even think really had a part in this season that will probably get picked up in the second part more.
I actually think that the series probably should have started with that episode.
Yeah.
Because one of my complaints about a lot of these original series is that they have these bottleneck flashback episodes to them. All the Marvel TV shows on Netflix had this. And when you're doing an episodic show week to week, it's not that big of a deal. But when you're doing a binge-worthy show where you're watching all the episodes, stopping the forward momentum of the story 3 or 4 episodes in to just fill in backstory kills the momentum of the show for me. And I feel like that is what happened with this episode, even though I felt like it was probably the most interesting episode of the series because they kind of thrust you into the story from the very beginning, and they don't give you a lot of setup as to
they have that little opening crawl type thing that you kind of have to read really fast.
Yeah, you have to read it really fast, and it's like 3 sentences long. So you're kind of introduced to the different aspects of this fantasy world, just by being exposed to the first couple episodes. But the third episode, where they do the flashback, actually fills in a lot of information about the bad guys, the Pact,
right?
What their deal is, what was going on with the fairies, the war. And I can understand why they set it like a couple episodes in, because they wanted to introduce the characters a little bit.
Yeah.
But I felt like it probably would have been better served if they had found a way to do it early in the first episode.
I do agree that it is probably one of the better episodes that they have in the show. And I liked it because not only did they kind of explain a little bit more about what was going on in this world and kind of flesh out some of the backstory, but they introduced a lot of elements that they didn't really talk about afterwards. Was these werewolf people, right? Or the humans on the Pact. Is that what they're called? The Pact is the bad guys, kind of like the Nazi type thing.
It's the Pact, PACK, I think.
And they have been using these.
They weaponize
werewolves.
Yeah, that's pretty awesome.
Yeah, it was dope. That was a cool scene.
And there was also a great scene where they were in a blimp, like a airship.
Yeah, the airships.
And dropping mortars on a fortified ferry.
Yeah, visually, this show is top notch.
Yeah.
You can't beat it. I mean, it's
movie quality.
It really is.
Yeah, I think the pucks are probably my favorite thing, is because all these actors, I honestly couldn't tell whether it was real prosthetics or if it was some kind of a mix between CGI and prosthetics.
Right.
But with these horns that they have on their eyes. And all the makeup that they had to use, plus their feet, like that was all top notch. I don't know if it was real or if it was CGI, but they did
I think it was practical.
It was practical. They did a really good job. I loved it. It sold it so well for me. The believability of watching these people who are like half ram, half people. Normally, if you like try to explain that to somebody, you're gonna be like, "How does that?"
And there's a really important character in the show who's a puck.
Yes,
who kind of he's like this character who became wealthy. Back in the fairylands, and he's migrated to this kingdom, basically Victorian England, and he's trying to break into human society, and you get to see like all the prejudice against him and stuff like that. And he's such a smart character, where like every time he goes up or butts heads with people. Like there's a great scene where they're having tea, like his he struck a deal with his neighbors who are in financial straits, where he would agree to invest in one of their business ventures if they helped kind of ingratiate him into society. So they invite kind of their upper crust friends over, and their friends are kind of taken aback that there's a puck there who's not a servant, that they're actually having tea with this puck. And one of them tries to be very, I guess, kind of ingratiating, where he's like, oh, what your people are going through, and, blah, blah, blah. And the puck's just there, and he's like, screw him.
Speaking of that, what did you think about that backstory for him, where he was basically he kind of sold his own kind? Yeah. I was really surprised that they went there with him, because they're trying to sell this guy as like being a underdog, right? He's the hero of the story, of this plot line. He's kind of the hero, but when they explain how he got his wealth,
he's definitely of a shaky moral character.
Well, it's one of those things where it's like, the Jews that cooperated with the Nazi type thing, where basically the only way he could thrive in the human world was to sell out his people to the humans and collaborate with them.
Yeah, the allegory is strong throughout this entire series.
Yeah, how did you guys think they handled that in this political sphere that we're in today?
Well, it's funny because I know that me and Matt talked about this before, where Matt didn't like the political allegory.
I see a agenda and everything these days. I just can't help it, And I think they went a little heavy on the on the allegory. I see a lot of what's the word? A lot of similarities, I think, between what's going on in London and England right now with all the refugees coming up from the Middle East. I feel like they use that for a lot of inspiration for this show, and
that makes sense.
Yeah, and you're not going to get away from that in any new series. I mean, television's always writers have always used modern.
Yeah,
modern
totally.
issues
Yeah, they're going
to do it. So
yeah, they're going to use what they know to inspire them to
but
write
as a
the story.
counterpoint to that, I didn't look at it as a topical thing. Like I didn't see the writers and producers sitting around saying like, I want to make a statement about immigration, and we're going to use this show to do that. It felt like, because whenever you have a story about migrants or immigrants or an unwanted populace kind of integrating into society, you deal with these issues, and that's just a natural kind of element of conflict. And again, I go back to Deep Space Nine, because there was that whole thing with the Bajorans and the Cardassians, which it's basically the same setup as this show. So
I hadn't even really thought about that.
Yeah,
that's you're 100% correct.
Yeah, so I look at it as more of a story element as opposed to a political message.
Yeah.
Because this is stuff that Victorian England dealt with, and that's kind of what it's based off of. And there is a very big political subplot that goes throughout this story. In fact, I think Jared Harris, who plays the kind of prime minister, was very underutilized in this show. But towards the end of the series, the politics kind of takes the forefront, that takes the front stage. So I can see people kind of mistaking the political storyline and the political undertones here for political messaging by the showrunners. But to me, it just feels like, hey, this is a story element. This is realistically how it would happen within this world. And we're going to utilize this to create drama within the series.
I agree with you, Matt. It makes sense. And it's not so specific that it sounds like it's coming from 2019. This literally can be placed on any past immigration, racism debate that's happened.
There's a lot of World War I parallels here too.
Yeah. So I think that was really well done. And let's talk about some of the plot lines. What was your favorite plot line? Because there was like 4 different separate ones that kind of converged at the end, more towards the end of the series. They all kind of met in the middle. But starting off, which one was your favorite? Was it Orlando Bloom's mystery plotline? Was it the Puck trying to get his way into society? And then there was the other one with the young guy and his mother. Matt, what was your favorite one, do you think?
I think my favorite storyline was probably Orlando Bloom trying to figure out his place in the world. It was interesting. A lot of I always lose my words here. A lot of surprises, a lot of swerves, and that was it was cool. I liked how they played it all out at the end. So
I agree. Orlando is definitely the shining light in this.
I would have liked to have seen more about the Faye girl, but she kind of disappeared about episode
they
5 or 6.
Forgot how to utilize her halfway through the series.
The main girl,
Carrie.
She kind of was. I guess you're right. She kind of did just end up as like a side,
because she got involved with that whole Faye underground group,
but like she's barely in the last 3 episodes.
Yeah.
And when she does kind of emerge, it's for the big Deus Ex Machina.
She definitely is a very she was kind of a side character. Orlando Bloom is definitely, the story is definitely about Orlando Bloom's character.
Well, it didn't start off that way though.
Yeah, it didn't.
It was kind of about their relationship, their history together. I feel like the mystery subplot with Orlando Bloom's character started off as my favorite, but actually kind of got resolved fairly quickly. I guessed the big revelation before it was revealed, so I was kind of, when they did finally reveal, I was just kind of like, eh. So like he starts off as my favorite storyline, but then some of the other storylines kind of take forefront in the series. Like we mentioned the Puck, I forget his name, but the one who's trying to integrate into society.
Agrius Astraeon.
Yeah.
Agrius.
Agrius.
So Agrius's storyline with what's her name, the human Imogen. That quickly became one of my favorite ones, just because I liked seeing their relationship developed. I liked seeing that kind of tension there, and the implications. Like obviously, Agrius is played by an African American actor, so there's some interracial undertones there as well.
That is true, but I'm going to counter that with, if you notice in the society, there were people of all different racial backgrounds already built into the society as part of the higher
But
crest.
I'm saying like there is some subtext there.
Yeah.
But I mean, like you basically get to see this woman have sex with a half man, half goat. So that was kind of weird.
There is a sex scene, yes.
Yeah. Oh, there are a couple sex scenes actually.
That was weird.
Yeah, and it's weird because like they're trying to make it all sensual and sexy, and like this goat man is taking off his shirt and he's got all this like hair on his chest and stuff like that. And you're just like, I don't know if I want to watch this. Because it is kind of like the whole bestiality thing. But actually, one of the things that struck me came in towards the end, and it was really weird how they did this, because there's a character in the show who is the daughter of the opposition leader to Jared Harris's prime minister, and there's this whole kind of plot line in the show, which is very important actually, about Jared Harris and his son and his wife, and the political machinations that are going on in the society. And this character of this guy's daughter turns out to be very important, but they don't introduce her until like episode 3.
Yeah, no, it's later than that.
I'm sorry, episode 4 or 5.
4 or 5.
And we don't really get to know her until like a couple episodes after she's introduced. Mm-hmm. And she ends up being a very kind of like Machiavellian Cersei Lannister type, in more ways than one.
Yeah.
And like her kind of plotting her, like she's almost like a supervillain in terms of like a Lex Luthor or Professor Moriarty, where she kind of orchestrated almost all of the events that the show is based around, and they kind of set her up along with Jared Harris's son as the big villains for the next season in terms of like the power that they wield within the government.
Yeah, they're the two heirs to the most powerful families in the city,
and that kind of became my favorite storyline towards the end of the show.
I did notice that they introduced her like really quickly, and they made her, like you said, one of the most powerful villains in the show just in a snap of a finger.
I feel like she should have been in since episode 1.
They should have introduced her way earlier than they did.
They did a little kind of a faint fake out where they made the girl from Game of Thrones who plays the mother and the wife of Jared Harris.
Oh yes,
I forget
Martell.
her name. She's an actor, British actress. They kind of set her up to be the main villain. In some ways she is.
Yeah.
But this other girl is actually the one who was manipulating her throughout the show. Mm-hmm. And so like she was kind of the one who was responsible for every major thing that happened in the series. And what's her name, Matt?
Indira Varma,
that's the one. So Indira was the one her character was set up to be the villain of this series. And I guess she was the big bad of the season. But this other girl is actually the show's central villain, in my opinion.
I guess we kind of spoiled everything for me.
It's been out.
I'll put a spoiler alert before. Yeah. That's all right though.
I'm trying to leave out the details so people can still be surprised.
Yeah, it's the details, but now they know all the characters and what they did.
There's a couple. We left out a lot. Actually.
It's a really good show though.
I'm sitting here. I'm looking through the IMDb of the cast. And Mr. Echeverria had way too much fun naming these characters.
Yeah, the names for these characters are ridiculous.
They are ridiculous, but I like that though. It shows them they took an extra step to make sure that this felt like another world.
But it's hard to keep them straight in your head because you can't remember their actual names.
Yeah, we're going back to their previous shows.
The chick who was in Game of Thrones. That one who played the wife on. Okay,
because I can't remember her
like
name.
Orlando Bloom and Cara Devangeline.
So like Legolas and that one girl from Game of Thrones is in this. And
but it was like what was Orlando Bloom's character's name?
Rycroft Philostrate.
And they just called him Philo. because you can't pronounce Philostrate. You can't even remember it. And then the main fairy, Kara's character, what was her name?
Vignette Stonemoss.
Yeah, and they just called her Vig or something like that.
These games, these are straight
Vignette.
Dungeons and Dragons characters.
Vignette, Vignette was her name.
Vignette.
Yeah.
I say more power to him.
I actually really like that name.
Leave it up to it is a cool name. Leave it up to us to try and remember these characters. If we love the show enough, I'm sure we will.
Well, I feel like as a science fiction writer, I make up a lot of crazy names, and the key to doing fantasy or science fiction names is that they have to be easily pronounceable, and they have to be easily memorable. So when you have two very difficult names back to back, like Rycroft,
Philo.
yeah, and the whole show, I thought his name was Mycroft, which is a reference to a Sherlock Holmes character,
Right.
but it's Rycroft. I didn't see that until I turned on like the subtitles. It gets confusing because like Matt said, when you're watching the show, it's like, Orlando Bloom's character, Legolas does this, and it's like, come on,
as opposed to something like Game of Thrones, which is almost in the same type of world where they have very memorable names like John and Eddard and
Jamie,
simple names,
Cersei,
yes,
and that's why we all remember those characters' names. I mean, early on, not like 8 seasons in. If this show gets to 8 seasons, I'm sure.
But I mean, like even when you get to crazier names like Daenerys, like you remember Daenerys.
Yeah,
she's probably the most strangest name.
Dany,
call her Dany. But anyway, so would you recommend this show to listeners who haven't seen it yet?
I would. I think that if you're into like Victorian mysteries and science fantasy shows, it's a good little 8-episode series to watch if you're looking for a good time waster, a good mystery. Actually, it reminded me a lot of the show The Alienist. If you ever saw that on TBS, it's kind of a Victorian era serial killer crime thriller. But with elements of Deep Space Nine and some of the steampunky and fantasy elements to it. So it covers a lot of different genres, and it melds them well together, and the characters are interesting, and it's a fun show, but it can be kind of like meh at times. So like I said, I'd give it like a 3-star, watch it if you're bored and you got nothing else to do.
All right, Matt.
I would agree with Matt. I think it's a fun watch. It's a good binge. It's not a long series. It's I think 8 episodes.
Yeah.
And if you like fantasy or science fiction, fun shows, then this one's for you. I mean, it's good. I like it.
I would also point out what's that guy's name?
Which guy? Runyon Millworthy.
Yeah. So there's a character in the show who he's kind of like a traveling performer.
Oh yeah.
And
I liked him.
He eventually becomes the tutor for the Prime Minister's son. And there's a great scene in there where he basically just put the Prime Minister's son tries to put him in or kind of walk all over him. And this guy just puts the guy in place because basically the son threatens to ruin him unless he just signs off on his tutorship because he doesn't want to be in school or be tutored. And the guy's like, I'm not afraid of poverty. I come from poverty. You don't scare me. Yeah. And I was just ambivalent towards that guy's character until that scene, but it comes so late in the season that I was like, I wish I could have seen more of this relationship develop throughout the show as opposed to seeing this one guy just be homeless.
It was like episode 6, I think that happened.
But he's set up for season 2 to be a very important part of that because he's now the top advisor to the Prime Minister's son. Yeah. And that has a lot of implications to it as well. So there's a lot, all the characters in the show are very well defined, very well developed. And I think there's a lot of potential for future. This whole season kind of felt like a setup for what they have planned to come, and it seems like they're building up to something much bigger than what this season alluded to. Because this kind of was, at its core, it was a mystery for this season, with a lot of setup for future stuff. So this show could get really good in seasons 2 and 3, and I know that the producers have come out and said that they actually have a plan for 5 seasons.
Oh, great!
And I wouldn't expect anything less from Echeverria because Deep Space Nine. That thing followed a very structured plan and paid off extremely well. So I'm looking forward to seeing what they got planned for this.
Yeah, I am too.
And also, if you're into cosplay,
all you
got to do is buy a Victorian outfit and get some fancy wings to wear around your neck.
Some steampunky stuff.
Yeah, it definitely has a lot of that steampunk vibe to it, and I like that. I would definitely recommend this to listeners. If we haven't already ruined all the plot lines for you, go watch this show. It's really well done. I enjoyed the crap out of it.
It's not for kids though.
No, it is not.
Don't watch it with the kids.
It's
around.
definitely up there in the range of oh yeah, look at that. They're having sex right now. We're watching it. We're watching
Orlando butt.
Couple butts, couple tits, couple
stuff. Boobies.
It's definitely
a lot
up
of
there
fairy
with,
boobs.
Yeah,
you get to see how fairies have sex.
It's up there with Game of Thrones and Outlander.
I wouldn't say it's quite the level of gratuitousness of Game of Thrones.
Not in the violence section, but in the sex, I think.
I
don't think in the sex either?
No. Like, a lot of the sex in Carnival Row, it's kind of toned down. There's not a whole lot of nudity. In Game of Thrones, they'd just be like, "Hey, look at these 3 whores. Let's have sex with them."
Yeah,
and it's like it's like full frontal.
I forgot.
You know?
I forgot about Littlefinger's brothel. Yeah, that was.